Did you know that Lohen was almost used as one of the Torre's test subjects when he was a child? But years later, he willingly became a test subject in the same experiments that had nearly claimed him. So how does someone go from nearly becoming the Torre's experiment to helping continue his work? It all comes down to one fear that follows Lohen for most of his life. The fear of being powerless while someone else decides his fate. That very fear shapes the way he fights, the dirty tricks he's willing to use, and eventually his choice to take part in illegal experiments. The Torre and Reyrir had a huge impact on the person Lohen became, but they still didn't make his choices for him. Lohen was hurt by other people's pursuit of power, and years later, he knowingly chose to keep that same cycle going. So does that mean Lohen is the last living segment of the Torre? Stay tuned to find out. The ending of his story quest actually really surprised me, because Genshin did something that I don't think it does enough of. There are real consequences for characters, especially the main characters. But to understand the person Lohen became, we first need to look at his past. Lohen was raised by his mother and father in Mondstadt. One day, Lohen went with his father to deliver an order to the city. On the way, they were attacked by a group of skilled bandits. His father tried to protect him, but Lohen was taken. These kidnappers were hired by Erok, an inspector of the Knights of Favonius who was secretly working with one of the Torres segments. Erok's people were abducting children and other test subjects for experiments connected to Ursa the Drake, a dragon that used to be an angel. Lohen was caught in the middle of a Fatui operation and was chosen as a test subject. Luckily, Lohen was rescued before he could be taken to the main laboratory. Adorno, the benevolent knight, led a group of knights who intercepted Erok's men and saved the kidnapped children, including Theodore. After the kidnapping, Lohen's parents became extremely protective, terrified that someone would take him again. But instead of hiding, Lohen started sneaking out with equipment he made himself to fight monsters around Mondstadt. It all came back to that same fear, being powerless while someone else decided or controlled his fate. Lohen learned how quickly his safety and freedom could be taken away, so he came to believe that becoming stronger was the only way to make sure it never happened again. He genuinely also wanted to protect others too, but his strength became proof that he was still in control of his own life.
We interrupt this lore spiral to bring you news from today's sponsor.
Today's video is sponsored by Nem Recall, a brand new story-driven gacha RPS available on iOS and Android. Nem Recall takes place in an alternate world very similar to ours, where four characters, Luca, Runa, Yume, and Ezra, discover a hidden network called Nem Space. And from there, they're pulled into this mysterious dream world full of strange wonders, secrets, and personal struggles that slowly unfold through the story. What makes Nem Recall really interesting is that it blends a narrative story experience with card collecting, team building, battles, and even interactive character chats. As you progress, you'll collect beautifully illustrated character cards through gameplay and gacha, then build your roster around each card's unique role, attribute, passive skills, active skills, and ultimate abilities. The core gameplay is all about strengthening your favorite characters, upgrading skills, leveling cards, uncapping them to push past level limits, and spending stamina on reward stages to earn the materials you need for progression. There's also an optional interactive chat feature where you can talk with the main characters as part of the story experience. So if you want a mobile game with mystery, dream world storytelling, gacha card collecting, and character-focused progression, download Nem Recall using the link in the description and pinned comment down below. Thank you so much Nem Recall for sponsoring today's video. Lohen quickly made a name for himself and joined the Adventurers Guild despite his parents' objections. They asked Adorno to stop him, but Adorno knew keeping Lohen sheltered wouldn't fix what happened. Most importantly, he needed guidance before his need for power became destructive. Lohen later joined the Knights of Favonius and passed the exam easily. After learning that Erok, the man behind his kidnapping, was dead, he became fascinated by Varka and started challenging him whenever he could. These weren't always fair fights. Lohen used traps, ambushes, poison, and any other trick he could think of. He wanted to understand every tactic someone might use against him, so he'd never be caught helpless again. He values effectiveness over honor. To Lohen, what matters is that it works and he's in control. Lohen is more complicated than someone whose goal is just seeking power. He can be brave, protective, and inspiring. His soldiers follow his dangerous plans because he's willing to put himself on the front lines and take the greatest risk. But the same qualities that make him a strong knight also make it hard for him to recognize when he's gone too far. When Varka prepared the expedition to Nodcry, Lohen fought to be included despite concerns about his reckless methods. He argued that if the knights couldn't protect themselves, they couldn't protect Mondstadt, and Varka agreed. During the expedition, Lohen proved himself in combat and intelligence work, taking on smugglers, the Wild Hunt, and Fatui forces. By then, it probably felt like his way of life had worked. He'd become a powerful knight who could protect both himself and others. But then he met Rayrir. Lohen joined Varka in an attempt to ambush Rayrir, the Rayhir of Solnari and one of Conria's 5 sinners. The knights badly underestimated him. Rayrir's abyssal power was far beyond anything an ordinary human could match. Lohen later describes himself as useless in that battle. Rayrir left him badly injured and dismissed him as slow, weak, powerless, and mortal. Lohen had to spend several days recovering. By the time he was back on his feet, the Traveler and the others had already managed to banish Rayrir. Rayrir's words affected him so badly because they tore apart the person he'd spent his whole life trying to become. He trained and fought so he'd never feel as helpless as he did during the kidnapping. But against Rayrir, none of that mattered. Lohen was completely outmatched and had no control over the fight. For a moment, he was utterly powerless again. Dottore and Rayrir both played a major role in shaping the person Lohen became. The kidnapping and Dottore's experiments created that traumatic wound and taught him he was weak and had no control of his own life. Then Rayrir reopened that wound and made him feel like despite everything he'd done, he still wasn't strong enough. Lohen also never personally faced Dottore during the end of the Song of the Welkin Moon Archon quest because he'd already been sent back to Mondstadt with members of the 5th Company. So he never got real closure from either situations. And even though Dottore is supposed to be dead, his influence still followed Lohen home. Despite nearly becoming a victim of his experiments as a child, Lohen later chose to help continue that same research, and even offered himself up as a test subject. To understand what Lohen did, we first need to understand Ursa the Drake and the experiments Erok carried out with one of Dottore's segments. Ursa the Drake had terrorized Mondstadt for more than 1,000 years and had once fought Vanessa, the first Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius. But Ursa wasn't originally a dragon. It used to be an angel. Long ago, thousands of years ago, the angels were apparently forced to make a difficult choice. Ursa chose to preserve its power. In doing so, it lost its mind and wisdom, leaving little behind besides that power. It was still drawn to human settlements, but didn't realize that its presence alone could destroy the people living there. Because Ursa had once been an angel, Vanessa chose to spare it and steal it away instead. Dottore later caused Ursa to wake up, and one of his segments worked with Erok to extract a serum from its flesh. Erok wanted to use Ursa's power to transcend human limits, while Dottore's research focused on breaking down Ursa's power, extracting it from its flesh, and transferring it into other living creatures. Seriously, he has an obsession with this. Even their best test subjects held less than 1% of Ursa's power, but it still made them stronger and more aggressive. The subjects also attacked each other, possibly because the separated pieces of Ursa were trying to become whole again. But the experiments weren't only meant to create stronger soldiers. Erok and Dottore also planned to use the altered creatures as imitations of Ursa and spread panic across Mondstadt. As the fear spread, more people would blame the Knights of Favonius for failing to protect them. That distrust would create an opening for Mondstadt's northern allies, the Fatui, to step in and offer their help. When the knights finally moved against Erok, he and his followers injected themselves with the serum. It made them stronger, but it also increased their bloodlust until they lost control and attacked one another. Erok ultimately died because of the same power he believed he could control. Before his death, Erok destroyed the records revealing the laboratory's location, and Varka suspects that Dottore's segment helped hide it. Years later, Dottore's equipment and Ursa's remaining power were still keeping the old test subjects alive inside the laboratory, and eventually, Theodore found it. By the time Lohen returned from Notcry, Adorno was old, sick, and nearing the end of his life. Theodore, who had trained as a medic, knew how serious this was. Adorno could go to sleep one night and simply never wake up. Theodore couldn't accept that. Using what little he remembered from the childhood kidnapping, he found Erok and Dottore's hidden laboratory and restarted the experiments, hoping Ursa's power could keep Adorno alive. He began by experimenting on monsters, but some of the test subjects escaped. That was when Lohen discovered what he was doing. Lohen could have ended it there. He could have reported Theodore or brought the knights to the laboratory. Instead, he killed or recaptured the escaped monsters, kept Theodore's secret, and chose to help him continue. Lohen helped Theodore for 2 reasons. First, he also wanted to save Adorno. The serum seemed to help at first, giving them hope that it might keep him alive. But Lohen also wanted Ursa's power for himself. After being humiliated by Rayrir, the serum looked like a way to suppress normal human limits and give him extraordinary powers he felt felt he lacked. So Lohen knowingly continued Dottoro's research. He helped refine the serum, supplied test subjects, delayed the Knight's investigation, and eventually volunteered to be tested himself. The experiment failed, but traces of Ursa's serum remained in his body, causing severe headaches and likely contributing to his loss of control during Sucros's reaction of his fight with Rerir. Lowen's past helps explain why he made these choices, but it doesn't make him innocent. Dottore wasn't there telling him what to do, Rerir wasn't controlling him, and Theodore wasn't ordering him. Lohen knew the experiments were dangerous, knew the Knights would eventually find out, and still chose to continue. When Varka confronted Lohen, he agreed to confess and accept punishment, but asked for one last night. He swore he'd return, and because Varka had never heard him make an oath like that before, he let him go. Lohen returned to the library where Theodore was still trying to finish the serum, but Lohen had finally accepted that it wouldn't save Adorno. It could kill him or keep his body alive while turning him into something violent and unrecognizable. Theodore still couldn't let go. He used the concentrated serum on himself, but extracting it had pushed Ursa's flesh beyond its safe limit, causing its power to overflow through the laboratory. When Adorno learned the truth, he embraced Lohen and Theodore, understanding why they were so afraid to lose him, even if that didn't excuse what they'd done. Lohen then faced one last temptation. Instead of injecting the remaining serum, he crushed the vial in his hand and used its scent to draw the monsters toward himself. Ursa still reached into his mind, using Eroc's promises, Rerir's insult, and Lohen's fear of losing Adorno to offer him the power he'd always wanted. But Lohen finally understood. He'd spent his life chasing power so no one could control him. As Lohen puts it, Ursa's power would only become one more thing controlling him. So he refused it. The others destroyed what remained of Ursa's flesh, and Adorno died soon after. Lohen was still punished. He was placed in solitary confinement, lost his promotion to captain, and wasn't allowed to inherit the title of Benevolent Knight. Even though I love Lohen and love him more now after this story quest, I actually really love this ending for him. The story never treats Lohen's trauma as an excuse. Yes, he has a lot of trauma. That explains his choices, but it doesn't make him innocent. He eventually helped stop the disaster, but that doesn't erase his role in creating it. Like Eroc, Lohen was influenced by someone else's pursuit of power, but he still made his own choices. And by the end, he's not all of a sudden this perfect hero. He still wants power and still believes the result can justify harsh methods. What changes is that he finally sees where that obsession can lead. He refuses power that would control him, takes accountability and accepts the consequences of what he did, and begins to break the same cycle that once hurt him. His past explains who he became, but it doesn't decide who he has to remain. This story quest also finally put an end to the Lohen is a Dottore segment theories, which I'm actually happy about because I always wanted Lohen to be his own character. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm your Leafy Lore Keeper Minzef, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to.